Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Dr. Hilliard, do you want to let me know? I know it's 11:30. I don't know if we still have people requesting to be admitted. Do you want to let me know when we can start? You're muted.
I should know this by now.
It's okay. It's a thing.
We have one more minute and then actually a couple more seconds and I will do the intro.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Howdy, Alex.
Hello. Thanks for being here.
All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. I have 11:30 on the dot. So we are excited to have you joining us for the North Carolina Conference for Educational Equity, brought to you by the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation at North Carolina State University. Welcome to Latinx Education, Critical Decisions for School Administrators. My name is Dr. Patricia Hilliard, and I am your session host. I am here to support the presenter, who I will introduce shortly, offer technical assistance to participants, as well as share the session evaluation and certificate information at the end of this session. Please do not hesitate to use the chat to ask questions. At this time, I would like to introduce you to our session presenter and my dear friend, Mrs. Myra Zito.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Buenos días todos. Gracias por estar aquí hoy con nosotros. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Our presentation today is regarding something that is very important currently, particularly in today's climate, building upon what critical decisions administrators can make to really ensure the success of their Latinx students. Our session goals for today. Our session goals for today are to really begin to discuss the Latinx diversity. I know there's a lot of questions that regarding Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, so we're going to touch upon a little bit of that this morning. Another one of our session goals today is to really highlight those pivotal decision points for school administrators and leadership for you to take back to your schools as points of conversation. And then lastly, one of our other session goals is going to be to discuss those best practices to ensure Latinx student success. Just a quick thing that as I was, kind of getting ready this morning that I wanted to share, I do not have all the answers. None of us do. And you may leave this session here today with more questions than answers, and that is okay. The point of today's session is to really bring forward some questions for thought and things for you to consider as you return to your, I say return to your buildings. Obviously, that's not going to happen. However, when you return back to meeting with your admin team or your school leadership, things that you really want to consider moving forward. If I did have all the answers, let's be honest, I'd be live streaming from a recently purchased private island. And so therefore, I do not, but I am very happy to begin this conversation with you all here today. So a little bit of who am I? Typically I do not go into this level of personal detail. If I was presenting to you on professional learning communities, I would go straight into the meat and potatoes. But today's session is a little bit more personal, because we're also now talking about ethnicity and culture, which is, a highlight of who I am. So my name is Myra Zito. And what I will note is that I'm actually going to be looking in multiple ways. It's not the ADHD, is that I am looking at different screens to make sure that I cover all the points of conversation that I want to share with you today. So a little bit about me, very quickly. I was born in the Bronx. From immigrant parents. My mother is from Dominican Republic and my father is from Ecuador. They immigrated to New York City, the Bronx specifically, in the 70s. Spanish is my native language. However, English is now my primary language. My grandmother from my mother's side is Afro-Latina, of Afro-Latina roots. If you see the picture there, my mother is Dominican Republic with Spaniard descent. My family is also heavily rooted in the United States military. We are a very patriotic family. If you look at the picture on the right, those are all my uncles and my cousins, or I'm sorry, my uncles and my brothers. My husband is Chinese, and so we have covered kind of all the spectrum as far as cultures. One thing that I did want to note is that, you know, Hispanic people come in all skin colors. You cannot assume that someone is or is not Latina, Latino, Latinx, just based off the way that they look. We all here recognize the importance of heritage, so I am proud to present to you today on what is a very important topic, which is our Latinx student community. Very quickly, on a professional level, I started my career as a lateral entry teacher, which is now known as alternative licensure, in Nash Rocky Mount Public Schools as a middle school science teacher. I taught middle school several years there before I transitioned to Wake County Public Schools, where I am now. Within Wake County, I have served as a science teacher, a high school assistant principal, senior administrator, and now as a teacher support coordinator within the human resources team. So that's just a little bit about who I am. So this question about Latino, Hispanic, and Spanish, it's a very interesting point of conversation that really has a lot of history tied into it. And so I'm just gonna kind of share just a quick 2-3 minute video for you to kind of just see what happens when we ask people about the differences between these three.
I'm gonna ask you, do you know what the difference between Latina or Hispanic and Spanish is?
Between Latina, Hispanic, and Spanish. I'm
gonna have to say where they live.
Okay, so like geographic.
Geographic.
I mean, they're just different ethnicities. I mean, between Mexican to Latin America to European.
That was confusing. The general public and the media use both of these terms interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. Hispanic is a term that refers to Spanish-speaking origin or ancestry. Latino is a more frequently used term which refers to origin or ancestry to Latin America.
Does Latina mean someone who speaks Spanish? Because in the case of Brazilians who speak Portuguese.
Hispanic is basically based on whether you or your family speak the language of Spanish, whereas Latino is focusing more on geographic location, that being Latin America. So unlike Hispanic, Latino includes Brazilians, but excludes Spaniards.
I hate when people call me Spanish because I'm not.
Okay.
You're Spanish because you're from Spain.
Spanish is from Spain, like
Yes!
conquistador, type thing.
I know a lot of people when they enter somewhere and they hear someone speak Spanish, like, oh, they're Spanish. And I'm like, no, they spoke Spanish too. That does not mean that they're from Spain.
For starters, Spanish describes someone who comes from Spain. It's a term of nationality, but it's also a language. Think of Italian. It's a language, but it's also a nationality. Which one is Latina? ¿Por qué no es Latina?
Por el semblante de la cara.
Semblante que tiene más African features.
No se ve latina, no se ve hispana.
She looks black.
Can you be black and be Latina?
I believe so, but some people of, Latin descent are like, no, we're different.
Those are the ones that have been colonized.
I'm not even gonna disagree with you there.
I think they all could be Latina. I feel like they could all be Hispanic. I mean, they all could be Spanish too. You don't know.
Yes! Perfect! You can't really tell just by a person's face whether they're Latino, Hispanic, or Spanish. Because many Latin American countries, like those of my parents, Colombia and Peru, were colonized by Spain, many folks don't feel the need or want to identify with a term that indicates them belonging to Spain. Maybe think of it this way. Hispanic, a sense of community through a connection to Spain. Latino, a sense of community through a history of colonization from Spain. colonization isn't something that we just read about in our textbooks. We feel the effects of centuries of colonization today through lost history, erasure of native and African languages, faith practices, basically our culture. So it's no wonder why so many folks just don't want to identify with the term Hispanic. That doesn't mean that Latino doesn't have any remnants of Spanish colonialism. I mean,
so just to kind of pause there, she kind of gets to the root of it. So let's talk about Latinx. There's been some questions. Yesterday there was a session that we sat in, and there was a lot of questions about Latinx and where it comes from. So the Latinx term expresses the inclusiveness of ethnic, cultural, and geographical identities reflected among people from Latin American countries in a gender-neutral form. It is really part of a linguistic revolution that challenges the notion that a group of Latin individuals should be referred to as Latinos, which is an inherently masculine term. For those of you that have studied Spanish, or whether you have or you not, you know that a lot of the Spanish language is has genders, so Latino, male, Latina, female, but when you have a group of Latinos together, it's a masculine term. So the X is to make it gender neutral. Some have really objected the word Hispanic because it has historical ties to Spanish colonialism. We are a group that is really hard to define and paint with a brush. The term, whether it's Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, is really an individual preference and really continues to be an ongoing conversation as our communities continue to evolve. So our Latinx student diversity. I wanted to share this map with you, again, because it's really important for us to consider all the areas that our Latinx students come from. If you look at the map on the right, it shows you the history around the culture that these countries come from. If you see, we've got mestizo, Native American, triracial, people with predominantly European backgrounds, mulattoes, and African Americans. So once again, it is a very diverse place of various cultures, and so no two of us look alike, and those are things that you want to consider as you're working with your Latinx student population, that different countries and cultures are also different. So where are the Latinx educators? Here is a recent statistic of the racial makeup of our North Carolina teachers. As you can note, about 78% of our teachers in North Carolina are white, where 16% is Black, African American, and 6.1% is that other. So what's interesting about that other is that the other is just not Latinx. The other is also, you know, Asian, Asian American, Indian, a variety of countries. So when you start really breaking that other piece into smaller parts, really the Latinx representation is very small. Dr. Hilliard, is that loud enough?
I try to reshape Latino narrative by helping them realize that they already have demonstrated so much resilience in their lives. One of the main barriers that Latino students face in particular is just not seeing role models in the classroom as teachers that reflect their own identities. We ask them to aspire to greatness and to these careers, yet we don't provide enough examples for them. The idea of being able to forge that many meaningful relationships and be a consistent figure in their lives. It's a task that you can't take on alone as just one teacher. I joined Latinos for Education, specifically the Aspiring Latino Leaders Fellowship. When I joined the fellowship, what I realized is that there are lots of different ways to be a leader, and I have to lead unapologetically from my own identity. So I think it's important that we have Latino leaders at all sectors so that power is shared and that all voices can be present.
On a national level, in reference to leadership, less than 5% of Latinx individuals make up school leadership. And then I believe I saw the national statistic was less than 2% for executive leadership positions. So your superintendents and other senior leadership within central services. So it's very alarming and disheartening rates. Compared to our percentage, our racial makeup of students in North Carolina, our Latinx students make up approximately 20% currently as of the 1920 school year of our student population. So I know that this is something that we've discussed, is an ongoing conversation. That's disproportionate. The numbers really should mirror each other. And so a conversation today is how can we actively pursue diverse staff. Our graduation rates, if you take a look, our Hispanic graduation rates are the lowest at 81.1%. And that is for a variety of reasons, some that we are going to kind of touch on today. And we really do believe that a couple of the critical decisions that we're going to discuss, which as administrators, you have plenty. So we, within an hour session, we can only touch on just a couple. And so we do feel that if you are intentional making these decisions, that we can increase those rates to make them proportionate to other students and other races. So our critical decision number one, teacher recruitment and retention. We're going to start off with some statistics. Latinx students are most likely to attend schools with highest level of poverty and also be enrolled in large class sizes. In addition to large class sizes, we also mean remedial courses as well. They're most likely to have inexperienced teachers who are novice to the career, additional teachers who are not certified. I'm thinking, alternative licensure, paraprofessionals. They also experience teachers that have negative stereotypes in regards to minority students. And they tend to receive lower academic ratings based just off their ethnicity and no data compared to their white peers. Things to consider when you return to your buildings or working with your staff. Continue to study your administrative hiring practices. What kinds of questions do you ask during your hiring practices? How do you actively seek for cultural competency? Seek to diversify your staff. If obtaining certified personnel is a challenge, look into your instructional assistants. There are many school systems that have IA to teacher programs to really help diversify that staff. If that is a challenge, look into your coaches. Can you seek coaches and people from outside of the community to serve in those coaching roles, whether it's athletics or clubs? Also look at, when hiring, also look into, could you potentially hire bilingual candidates? They do not have to be of Latinx descent to be considered diversifying your staff. There's a lot of people that I have met across the years who study Spanish, and so that is also a good opportunity for you to seek those candidates who are able to bring the language to your school. In regards to retention, things to consider. Consider your ratio of veteran to beginning teacher ratios. Some of our schools that are high need, unfortunately, can tend to have high ratio of beginning teachers. So that's something to think about as you are hiring, especially right now with your current vacancies. What is the percentage of beginning teachers that you have at your schools? My office, the office that I work with and my team, we support the beginning teacher program. And so those are data statistics that we look at often is what schools have high number of beginning teachers and what does their turnover rate look like? Make sure that your course assignments are ideal distribution to really reduce that teacher burnout. Are the majority of your beginning teachers receiving the large classes, high remedial, or are they just your veteran teachers? So making sure that there's some equal distribution. Ensuring that everyone across your staff has foundational English learners' best practices. This is not just the work for ESL teachers or the Spanish teachers. It should be a norm that in your professional learning communities or teams that they actively have ongoing conversations and as part of their PLTs, discuss and build in these best practices into their lesson plans. Extend this work beyond your front office staff, the Spanish teacher, and the ESL. That goes back to kind of what I just mentioned. The burden falls a lot on that ESL or the front office staff. This is work for everyone, which then leads into the next bullet point, is really creating those systems to develop the bilingual skills among our existing staff. We have to meet our students where they are. I know that I experienced an administrator who actually purchased some professional learning for the staff to study Spanish. It doesn't necessarily have to be Spanish. There are other schools that I've attended that have predominantly another nationality within their building. And so these are things to consider. How can we build these basic language skills among our staff so that when parents who do not speak English come to the front office, it's not a scramble of let me find the one person in this building that speaks the language. Everyone should have some basic knowledge of just basic language communication skills. In an ideal world, of course. So why does staff diversification matter? There's an interesting quote that I recently found for Marriage for Latinx students. And it states that Latinx teachers face what is often referred to as an added tax because of their identities, including bias, challenges to their classroom strategies, and added obligations, such as translating between English-speaking colleagues and Spanish-speaking parents. That is one thing that I know personally as an administrator has been a fault of mine when I served as an administrator, is I was guilty of, although I did speak the language, as you all know, we are busy running around from classroom to classroom, wherever you're called. And so I know that I personally have been guilty of finding that one teacher who can communicate. And so just being conscious of that and trying to start thinking outside the box of how can we start taking some of that burden and distribute the work among your staff. So in the chat box, I know I've done a lot of talking. Based on your experiences or things that you have heard, what are some successful ways to recruit Latinx educators? And this may be things that you have implemented or things that you've heard your colleagues or other school systems do that you are interested in. So take a few minutes, if you don't mind, to just drop your ideas and thoughts in the chat box, and we'll just kind of look over them and share out some thoughts.
So Maria is talking about having more Latin recruiters.
Absolutely. Yes, we agree. If we, and this is just a personal opinion of mine, I do agree, if we are going to try to recruit Latinx candidates, we definitely would want some representation within the recruiters. Sometimes, my mom says it, and whether it's right or wrong, and, we are obviously being very honest here. Culture recognizes culture. And that's something that my mom said. And, we are having very open conversation these past 2 days with equity. And so that's just being very honest, is culture recognizes culture. So yes, having representation among recruiters.
Virginia says recruitment of Latino professionals takes place differently. You have to recruit the family. I really like that point.
Yes.
They're flying in, so I'm trying to get them all. I think this is from Vincent. I think you have to start with school, seeming to be a place where Hispanic and Latinx students are celebrated and not just tolerated.
I like that. Celebrated versus tolerated. That is so powerful.
I'll read off a couple of more. Shannon, I would think that it comes from job description, make it clear to hire a diverse staff. And then I'm going to contradict Shannon's just a little bit with, gosh, I saw it up here from Virginia, that hiring is key, but as a former principal, she often faced district resistance when posted for bilingual personnel. This is also a systemic and policy issue.
I agree. Those are conversations that we have at some point that really need to, it's a policy thing, right? Like when we talk about where are the Black and brown teachers, are we explicitly stating and being honest that this is what we are looking for? Until we are transparent in what we need and what we want, then we're going to continue to gain the same results. But yes, this is a larger conversation more than something that we're going to solve in this 1 minute, in this 1 hour professional learning. Trisha, Dr. Hilliard, anything else that sticks out?
Just wanted to uplift what, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Shifa. It has a point about, we're talking about more recruitment, but Shifa also wonders how many unemployed certified Latinx teachers there are in North Carolina.
Repeat that, can you repeat that one?
How many unemployed certified Latinx teachers are there in North Carolina? Just a question for us to consider.
That would be a good statistic. I noted one thing that kind of stuck out to me is that making sure that your Latinx students have positive experiences in schools. And so that is going to be key, kind of on this topic, and also when we talk about programs. If we say that we're having a hard time finding Latinx educators, there are school systems that have their own homegrown or teacher prep programs within their own schools to start grooming their students to become teachers. And so that's something to consider is, can you, if you have a predominantly large population of Latinx students, how can you start grooming some of those students to begin considering the teaching profession and ultimately come back to your school systems? So those are all great points of conversation. Okay. Critical decision number 2, having a culturally responsive staff. We want to make sure that we help our teachers recognize how the cultural values of our home may be different than the ones that are displayed within the school environment. Also, ongoing professional learning, not just for teachers, but also for school counselors, regarding those best practices, not just in terms of, just your general, your general student, but also within, what is the best practices within the Latin American community? I'm also thinking in regards to course enrollment and college and career readiness. I'll just kind of share just a quick story about why that really hits home for me. When I was in high school, I was one of those students who slept through most of my classes. It's not anything I'm proud to mention, but I'm here today. And I remember junior year, I had a friend of mine, bring up the word college. Mind you, I'd never even heard that word, which now is very baffling to me. And I went to go speak to my counselor because no one had ever approached me about college. And now, obviously, this was, not that long ago, however, time frame. But I know these things still happen today. And so when I went to approach my counselor about college, I was not met with open arms. And I had mentioned a college university that I was interested in, and make a long story short, he said that I was not qualified, and I did not have the grades and background to get into this school. Fast forward a couple years later, I had a conversation with a friend who had mentioned going to this university, who sparked the I want to go to college idea. And we had this conversation, and we wound up sharing we had an open conversation, and we shared our GPAs and our SAT scores and everything, and we mirrored. And so it was very interesting that she had a different experience as a white female versus me as a Latina female, where we both had the same backgrounds, yet we were not, advised similarly to be able to pursue these post-secondary institutions. Ensuring that we have intentional processes to provide equal or access to advanced placement and gifted programs. making sure that you have representation of Latinx and diverse population in your gifted programs. How many of your Latino students are in AP and honors courses? Is this something that you frequently, as the school leader, that you frequently request and have this ongoing conversation with those that are responsible for enrolling students in courses? Ensure that your stakeholders develop a student and family support matrix, develop a task force if necessary. We have these general matrix on how to support students that need those additional supports, but really taking a closer look at what do this particular group of students need and how can we differ our services for them. This is particularly at the secondary level, ensuring that any communication coming from student services is translated as best as possible into dual languages. Also, if possible, any of the meetings that they have. We all know that children of high poverty have parents who have a difficult time coming to school functions. And so how can we record these or stream them or air them, however, so that they reach home? Develop school-wide assessments to evaluate the cultural responsiveness of your school. So this is not just a one teacher evaluating a single teacher, but having students and teachers evaluate the school as a whole and using that data to make decisions on how to improve. And also outlining a set of best practices for when immigrant students enroll in your schools. Things that I want you to consider is, how do you onboard students who enroll into your schools who do not speak English? How do you notify teachers? One of the things that I frequently encountered upon having conversations with some of our Latinx students is that they show up at the door with the teacher, and they don't get the friendliest reception. Teacher is another one. I don't have a chair. And so I don't know how many of you have gone overseas and you've traveled into other countries where you don't speak the language. It is very, it's jarring. And so I think of, Dr. Hilliard is shaking her head, yes. Dr. Hilliard, I know you went, I think you were in Germany or somewhere not too long ago. And I've also been to Germany, and it's very jarring to go into a country where you don't speak the language. And so really, what is our processes for when we have these students? How do we welcome them? What is our process for immediate parental involvement? And course selection. It's very interesting. When your students who do not speak English, what is your school's process for identifying the courses that they go into immediately? We all know that they typically enroll in ESL. But what other strategic conversations are had regarding, are they going immediately into your, English 1 course or English 3? Are we waiting for second semester? Can we somehow shift their course schedules to ensure that they are successful? So making sure that that is not just an individual counselor decision, but how, as your school leaders, do you set the expectations and the bar for this is what I expect out of student enrollment? Being sure that your staff stays up to date on Latinx education trends. There are 2 websites here that you can visit, Latinos for Education and NABE. These 2 post frequent quick reads on recommendations, ideas, and best practices regarding current trends. So that's something that if possible, you may want to embed into your school culture of how are we, it's not just when this is now an issue and we're looking at test scores, how do we stay up to date and have this as an expectation? Additional questions to consider. I'm gonna give everyone about a minute. These are some heavy questions that we will not answer these questions today, but things that I want you to think about when you when at the conclusion of this. So take a minute to read these questions. Okay. So what are the implications of low Latinx student enrollment in gifted programs and high enrollment in remedial or special education services? In the chat box, we would love to hear your thoughts and ideas around this question, and Dr. Hilliard will share out some things that pop out.
Well, even before you ask this question, I have some responses to it from Rachel. She said she's had to fight for her migrant students to be placed in appropriate courses, and typically they're placed in PE and non-state tested. So in answering that, the students that Rachel has come in contact with have not really had the full experience. Elena talked about many Latinx students are placed in alternative schools to reduce the risk of graduation rates. So again, we're talking about students not having access to high quality education. Vincent is saying that this leads to a vicious cycle of low expectations and low performance. Rachel, again, Latinx students will not believe they are capable of high achievement. There's so many studies that talk about students taking on, if the teacher has the low expectations, the teachers take that on too. Jonathan, thank you for bringing up that point. So we're just talking about school, but Jonathan says that there are significant lifelong impacts related to the lack of access to educational resources, including higher education. They're flying in right now. Right. Difficult to break out of deficient mindset from don't have a full name. Be wise. In my experience, students are placed in exceptional services in preschool, and the reason is not clear. I have exited several in kindergarten and first grade. So we're talking about systemic issues if we're talking about Latinx students being placed in exceptional. And if a child needs it, that's one thing, but if it's because the child speaks a different language, that's another thing, especially at 4 years old.
Dr. Hilliard, you bring up an interesting, and the educator who posted that also brings up an interesting point that some of the literature that I came across was the overrepresentation of Latinx students in special education services. And so that would be a whole nother presentation. And so I really didn't touch upon that, but that is something to consider. And I think if it's okay, I'm gonna move on just for time's sake.
Yes.
Okay. So I came here to learn. So critical decision number 3. Oh, excuse me.
Aprender inglés no es fácil. Yo todavía no hablo perfecto inglés, pero lo he intentado y lo intento diariamente.
Yo no hablaba ni una palabra en inglés, ni siquiera la palabra hola podía decir.
Yo siempre tuve una meta que yo podía hacerlo y logré aprender el inglés.
Mi nombre es Iván, originalmente de El Salvador. Tengo 19 años. Mi papá se mudó hacia los Estados Unidos cuando yo tenía 7 años. Él nos decía que era un país libre donde no se tenía que preocupar por la falta de oportunidades. El primer día en mi escuela yo pensaba que esta escuela no iba a ser para mí porque mi profesora hablaba inglés, pero no hablaba español. Y eso Fue difícil para mí porque no entendía nada, pero ellos siempre buscaban la manera de ayudarme.
Mi nombre es Leslie, yo vengo de la República Dominicana y tengo 18 años de edad. Sociedad Latina es un programa que ayuda a la juventud y aquí yo puedo desarrollarme más haciendo lo que me gusta, que es el canto. My mom doesn't know any English at all, so every time I go to her to an appointment or to the store or any place, I have to translate for her.
Me llamo Erika, soy de Ecuador y tengo 17 años. Cuando recién vine que no sabía nada, yo estaba perdida. I met Hilda like a year ago. She's my mentor.
That's exactly it. I think
She helped me get involved in my community because I love helping people.
When I hear negative things that people say about immigrants, it made me feel sad and angry at the same time. Because they don't know how hard it is for us, the immigrants, to learn the language. They have no idea what sacrifice we have made to be where we are right now.
A lot of us come here for the American dream. We come here to work hard and to have a better future.
Cuando se ponen a hablar así de eso, yo digo que para mí soy latina y estoy aquí para superarme. In the school you go to learn, do homework, tests. Here you participate, interact with other people. Coming here, I practice my English. I speak more. I have like the opportunity of learning new words.
I've developed a good relationship with all my classmates here. Right now we're working in Spanish songs, specifically in Selena's. I know the songs because that's my favorite artist. The vocalists that I'm working with, they don't really know the Spanish language. So I help them pronounce the word, helping them sing it.
Mi primera maestra de inglés que tuve, ella tuvo un contacto con la Universidad de Harvard en un programa que se llama Rise Up. Y ese programa es específicamente para estudiantes que son inmigrantes y que están aprendiendo inglés. Yo escribí mi ensayo, yo le puse mucha pasión y me aceptaron. They were so happy to have me there. And I will be working with them during the summer in the neurology department. Imagínense si no hubiera sabido inglés, nunca hubiera tenido lo que tengo ahora. Entonces, inglés es súper importante y esto es una gran transformación.
Funny, she was mentioning that she was teaching Selena songs. For those of you, Selena is almost like the Michael Jackson for the Latin American community.
In a good way, not the bad Michael Jackson way.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's use somebody else, yeah. I'm trying to get out of here and it will not, there we go, okay. Yes, in a good way. All right, so critical decision number 3, programs. Counter spaces. Create counter spaces for your students, which are pockets of collective resistance embedded within larger contexts that enable individuals from marginalized groups to engage in collective disruption of the dominant narrative of the larger institution. So kind of breaking that down, because that's a lot to unpack. Counter spaces go beyond a space for just Latinx students to gather. Think more than the traditional Spanish or Hispanic club. It creates an opportunity for students to engage school leadership and other stakeholders in ongoing dialogue regarding cultural identity and issues related to their experiences, both in and out of the school community. Purposeful programming elevates their purpose. Allies are welcomed as listeners and supporters. So at your schools, what spaces do students have, Latinx students, to really discuss those hard issues that sometimes we tend to skirt around? A quote from Dr. Keels: "When minority students feel cultural stress due to isolation and marginalization, their ability to engage in majority campus activities is strengthened by them also having minority-focused spaces that validate their cultural identity." So that's very powerful. How do you bring these students together with a purpose? And it's more than just they're in ESL class together and that's their time to bond. It has to be intentional and reach outside of those classroom walls, really into the school culture and community. For the sake of time, I'm gonna I'm gonna scoop past some of these quickly. Critical decision number 3, engaging your families. Latinx parents and guardians really have a difficult time navigating the US school system. As some of you, as we are familiar with, sometimes they come from their own countries where education is just not an opportunity. So not only do they not really know the education system, then you take it to a next level of another country and another language. So really creating those opportunities for families to learn how to advocate for their children, providing them the resources, questions to ask, best practices when meeting with teachers, really creating leaders out of parents. Building bridges. According to a survey conducted by the Associated Press Center for Public Affairs in the spring of 2018, nearly 6 in 10 Latinx adults have difficult time communicating with healthcare providers because of language or cultural barriers. And so we think about that. If they have a hard time communicating their own medical necessities, what challenges arise when they are trying to discuss education and the terminology and jargon that we use within our own school communities? We know that most of the official notices that we send out should be translated, such as your lunch forms, etc. But what are the other non-critical messages that go out on a day-to-day basis of important information that really should be translated as well? School communities should strive to increase the translation of notices, letters, permission slips, and other weekly newsletters. So working with the task force, if you do not already have, to create a systemic plan for how do we communicate and translate documents that go out to parents in our community. There are many effective models in our states for family outreach programs. The Wake County Public School System developed a family academy with the purpose of providing families with many tools necessary to support their children and make them equal partners. For example, the Family Academy teaches lessons in both Spanish and English at various school sites and live streams on relevant topics and happenings that are relevant and related to our school district. So that's a little bit of a shameless plug. I know that there are a lot of great programs out there, but this is Dr. Maria Rosa Rangel. I know that's a long name. Email me if you would like to get her information. This is really her area. She is director with the Office of Equity Affairs for Wake County Public Schools, and she does an amazing job with this Family Academy, and it has really taken off to really make leaders out of parents and providing services in dual languages. The Latino Family Literacy Project, I'm not gonna click on this video just because there's one last thing I want us to get to. But this project is interesting where they have parents come in the evenings to read books as a group, and they teach the parents literacy skills so that their parents can then turn around and read to their children at home. So that's interesting because it's not just a one-on-one, it's a whole community of them, and so it creates a safe space and an opportunity for educators to really build those relationships with parents. When I watched, and you can feel free to Google the Latino Family Literacy Project, there was a lot of good information and positive experiences that parents shared. So that's out there on the internet for whenever you have some time. I think it is kind of the elephant in the room, right? I know that you all are here with us today, but we know that this is a very different time right now. And so you are, in addition to thinking about your typical critical decisions, Now the stakes are even higher as we continue in remote learning for the 2021 school year. And so as a bonus critical decision, before we depart, I want you to take a minute to read a quick excerpt from the New York Times regarding high quality, authentic remote instruction as it relates to this upcoming school year. So Dr. Hilliard is going to insert the bit.ly into the chat box.
And for those, sorry, Myra,
no, go ahead,
for those iPhone users, sorry, I don't know about Android or Google phones. For those iPhone users, you just open up your camera, go over that QR code, and you are all set. For the rest of you who have phones that I know nothing about, you type that in, or I put it also in the chat.
Thank you. Take a minute to read the quick excerpt. And when you are done in the chat box, please share what this excerpt means to you as the instructional leaders in your buildings. We'll give everyone about 2 minutes. I see your answers beginning to trickle in. So what does this mean for you as the instructional leaders?
I'm seeing a lot of responses about expectations. That if we don't, the very first one that came in from Susan is if we don't raise our expectations for teaching during remote learning, the achievement gap will continue to grow. From Trent, ensure admin and teachers don't relax their educational standards and expectations to help families gain access to broadband or hotspots. It would, if you were in the panel, Dr. Contreras talked about that. Virginia, thanks you for the article. This is why my heart is really heavy now. Our Latino students already have so many challenges to deal with, and this pandemic is just making it harder for them to stay on par and on track. Lowering the bar is just doesn't help students, from W. Smith. Increase access and fidelity of instruction. Do not lower instructions. Oh, wow. We've got some really great responses in here. I'll just read 2 more. Tara, if our low-income parents are working, they are not available to assist students. During remote instruction, it's tough. It's a tough situation. And Tara, my own personal opinion is we have to plan knowing our students and knowing who is going to be helping our students, not lowering our expectations, but just managing that and planning that and designing instruction around who is going to help with that. And then the last one I'll do from 3 Stanley from Warren County, because I do have a special place in my heart for Warren County, having been at the high school, what it means to me. And as the article pointed out, that parents of Black and Brown students truly want their children to learn, absolutely, and it's up to us to make sure that they do.
Thank you, Dr. Hilliard. That's a lot to process. One comment that all the comments were great, but one thing that really stuck out to me, I think to kind of tie it all up, is I believe is Vincent. He said, I think many of us know all the right things to say, but now it is time to start following through. And so I think that what a great way to really conclude today's session is that we know the things that in our hearts that we should do, and everyone is pulled in different directions. But now it's where the rubber meets the road, particularly going into this upcoming school year. Going in, you know your student population, you know the students that are high needs. And so how can you start now making sure that your teachers identify those students so that day one, when school starts, they already know that these are the students that really we need to be on the lookout, because they are the ones that are going to fall through the cracks. So thank you all really so much for participating in today's session. I feel like, I kind of just skirted over a lot of topics. It's 1 hour and it's really hard to really dig deep into a lot of these things. This is an ongoing conversation. If you would like to touch base or you have any questions or want to chat further, feel free to contact me. My name is Myra Zito and my email address is there, mszito@wcpss.net. Feel free to tweet me at mszito_1. Dr. Hilliard, I think you have a couple of things before we close out.
Yes, I keep dropping the link to the session evaluation in the chat. So please complete the session evaluation if you are looking for a certificate of attendance that will be obtained through the session evaluation. Also, that helps us collect your thoughts and ways in which we can improve your experience. Also, another little self-promotion. Well, I guess this whole entire conference is self-promotion for me, for having an idea of having a high quality conference for education in North Carolina. But I do want to promote that Laura Albright and I will have an end of the day reflection for 30 minutes at the end, because every session that I go to, it is so great and so inspiring and so heavy as well. So we just want to kind of process that as we conclude the day. So that link is in the email that you got. No registration is required. Just drop on in at what starts at 3:15 so we can process everything that we learned today. So thank you, and thank Myra for giving us such an inspirational presentation today.
Y gracias a ustedes, yo estoy viendo que muchos de ustedes están escribiendo en español en the chat box, entonces yo me alegro que ustedes disfrutaron hoy, y ojalá por favor nos comunicamos, ustedes pueden communicate with me and vice versa. Thank you all very much.
So we will stick around until for the next couple of minutes. For anyone who has any questions, here is a session evaluation again. Yes, Teresa, you will get access to the recordings for all of the sessions besides just a few of them. Yes, and this one is one of them you will have access to.
Gracias a
Elena,
ustedes.
do you see that there's 3 dots next to the chat? If you click on those 3 dots, it should let you save the chat to your computer. Give me a yes or no if you see it. You don't see it? Okay, this is the super secure NC State account. Sometimes it does not let participants, save it just for security purposes. So we will have to put the save chats as well on our website. De nada.
I see you, Dr. Hilliard, sharpening your Spanish skills.
I have the Spanish skills of a 2-year-old. Yes.
Yeah, that's okay.
Es excelente, me parece excelente que practique su español. No.
Claro que
Muchas
sí.
gracias, ha sido una buena presentación.
Oh, ¿y quién es usted?
Elena Carson, soy peruana y estoy en Franklin, North Carolina, que es en cerca de Asheville, pero un pueblito muy pequeño.
Oh, ok. Buenas tardes, Elena. Muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy.
Mucho gusto. Y no hay otras profesoras latinas, soy la única profesora en todo el distrito. Hay una tutora también peruana que trabaja en una de las escuelas y una intérprete cubana, pero es una minoría bastante aplastante, ¿no?
Ay, Dios. Bueno, usted por favor comuníquese conmigo. Nosotros podemos estar hablando y create like this network. So ahí está mi email address. Por favor, me encantaría hablar con usted.
Ya tomé nota de eso y también estoy usando mucho de los materiales de Academy, de Family Academy. So ya me puse en contacto, creo que es con la señora Rosa, que me ha estado enviando los PowerPoints y otros. So, realmente me ha servido muchísimo.
Ay, qué bueno. Dr. Rangel is dynamic. So I'm so glad to hear that you are communicating with her. Y si usted necesita algo, por favor, pero yo quiero hablar con usted cuando pueda.
Ok, muy bien. Gracias a las dos.
Gracias, adiós.
Adiós.
Any last minute questions, comments before we log off? Okay. Well, that's it. Thank you all. See you in the next session.
Dr. Hilliard, thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye.